Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel Remembrance or Memorial Day continuing, ending tonight with Israel's Independence Day. Meanwhile, the Muslim holy month of Ramadan begins, and as more and more coronavirus restrictions are lifted. To begin, it is the third such attack over the last few months. Another Israeli-owned ship, again sailing under the Bahamian flag, has come under attack in the Gulf of Oman. Unnamed Israeli officials reportedly blaming an Iranian missile for the attack, though no damages or injuries were reported, and the ship is already back en route. In efforts to reduce tensions in the Gulf, however, Israel apparently planning not to retaliate, while asking the United States to help in protecting the ship, the MV Hyperion Ray. In any case, all this coming just days after an allegedly Israeli bomb at the Iranian Natanz nuclear facility, which Iranian officials are calling a terroristic and idiotic gamble. Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif instead threatening to retaliate against the culprits and arguing that Iran's hand in nuclear negotiations with the West has only been strengthened. In fact, Russian mediators now fully backing the unconditional lifting of United States sanctions on Tehran, while Iran publishes plans to expand its enrichment program closer and closer to the 90% enrichment needed for military use.
On nuclear developments, yesterday we sent a letter to the agency that we are going to add 1,000 more centrifuges to Natanz facility. That is in addition to the current number of machines. Also today, we just sent a new letter to the agency saying that we would start from tomorrow enrichment up to 60%, and that is for Iran needs to produce certain radio isotopes needed for certain medical treatments.
That said, senior nuclear officials in Iran confirming that the blast at Natanz has in fact destroyed or severely damaged thousands of centrifuges used to enrich uranium, which in turn seriously dampening Iran's ability to ramp up enrichment as threatened. Now, Yom HaZikaron, or Israeli Memorial Day, continuing this morning until sundown. Israelis across the country commemorating the fallen with nationwide events and sirens. Annual memorial sirens sounding across the country last night at 8 p.m. and again this morning at 11. Millions stopping in their tracks to stand in silent observance and reflection on behalf of the nearly 24,000 Israelis who've died in battle since 1947, as well as for police officers who've fallen on duty and for victims of terror. The annual ceremonies, including musical performances, speeches by Israeli heads of state, family storytellings of their loved ones lost, a display of all the names of the fallen, and more. Coronavirus masks in the crowds, leaving only the teary eyes of the hundreds in attendance visible.
איך קמים? איך קמים? לבחור בחיים זו הבחירה הכי קשה. כל ההורים השכולים, כולנו, אנחנו נכים. לקחו לנו משהו מהגוף. אדם שאין לו יד או אין לו רגל, הוא יודע שיש לו 20% כל החיים. לנו הנכות היא יומית, 100% כל החיים.
היה לה כל כך אכפת מאיתנו ומהנכדים. אתה מסתכל פנימה, אתה אומר, וואי, למה לא הערכתי את זה כשאמא כן הייתה איתנו. אתה אומר, איזה עצוב זה שזה לא יהיה ככה יותר.
Likewise, earlier in the day, Prime Minister Netanyahu and wife Sarah meeting with the torchbearers for Wednesday morning ceremonies, as well as with IDF widows and orphans, sharing stories and messages of support and of hope.
ואני כבר אומר לכם, זה יחיה בלב שלכם עד יומכם האחרון. זה לא עוזב. ולא צריך לעזוב. נכון. לא צריך לעזוב. הפוך, הפוך. אבא חי בתוככם. חי בתוככם. ממה שהכרתם או מה שלמדתם אחר כך מאמא, מאחים, מהילדים, מהמשפחה. אבא חי בתוככם.
Then the central ceremony taking place this morning at the National Memorial Hall for the Fallen at Mount Herzl Military Cemetery in Jerusalem. This followed by fighter jet flyovers and waves of bereaved families visiting military cemeteries. And finally, at sundown tonight, a gear shift from Israel's saddest day to the happiest day, Independence Day, a nationwide practice in gratitude and in remembering what the fallen fought for. Now, in tragic news, PTSD-afflicted IDF veteran Itzik Sadian setting himself on fire outside of a Defense Ministry office earlier this week in efforts to bring attention to PTSD treatment in Israel, or rather the lack thereof. And this just as the nation beginning its annual Memorial Day events in honor of fallen soldiers and victims of terror. Israeli officials vowing to respond.
מוקדם יותר הערב שוחחתי עם יושב ראש ארגון נכי צה"ל, עידן קליימן. אני הבעתי זעזוע עמוק מהמקרה, וגם אמרתי שאני מחויב לביצוע רפורמה מקיפה בדרך שבה אנחנו מטפלים בנכים, נכי צה"ל ובפצועינו. ואני בטוח שבזה אני משקף את דעתם של רבים מכם.
Joining us to discuss IDF veteran and PTSD survivor Tomer Alper. Tomer, thank you so much for being with us. Now, what is your reaction to this horrendous and tragic event, especially as it comes just hours before the whole country starts paying respects to the fallen soldiers and victims of terror?
First of all, hello, and thank you for having me here today. This story is so tragic. It's so upsetting. It's saddening, and it shouldn't have happened at all. It's just a mistreatment from the Department of Defense.
How do you perceive the current process that the IDF takes in assessing the impact of mental disorders and PTSD and addressing it?
I think the whole process is just wrong. People with PTSD and even physical disabilities need to stand in front of really cold-hearted people that has no interest in helping whatsoever. It's just upsetting, that's all.
I mean, is there a lack of resources? Is there a lack of understanding? You know, what are the problems, and what would you suggest be done?
I think there's not a problem of resources, even though I'm sure officials will try to tell to the public that they're trying to save taxpayer money. I think everybody who's served in the IDF knows that there is a total waste of money, total waste of resources, and it needs to go to the right places. So resources are not the problem. The problem is lack of understanding, lack of caring. Again, you need to face very difficult people. It's an uphill battle every step of the way. Even being recognized. I myself never tried even to be recognized by the Ministry of Defense because I know the process every person with PTSD needs to go through. I've been through physical injuries, and so I know the process from that aspect. But it's the same. You face people who tell you from the very start. They tell you you're a fraud, you're a thief, you are a liar, and you need to prove you're not. In the lowest moments in your life, you just face these people, this system that mistreat you after you gave your whole self, your whole life, your body, your soul, your mind. You give it to the people, you give it to your country, to your friends, to your family. And when you're in time of need, no one is there to lift you up.
All right. Well, of course, we are wishing the fastest recovery to Itzik Saidan, who's in the hospital with his burns, and that, as you said, Tomer, that all of the resources go to where they need to go. Tomer, thank you again for joining us. Moving on, ahead of Israeli Memorial Day, the Muslim community getting ready for its own tradition of introspection, the holy month of Ramadan beginning Tuesday. Hannah Rifkin with the details.
Israel and Palestinian Muslims setting up for the holy month of Ramadan, complete with colorful lanterns and ornate decorations all across the country. And with the pandemic in Israel dying down, the difference in excitement over last year clearly felt on the streets.
هنا صراحة خصوصا البلدة القديمة يعني كتير تأثرت وتضعضعت. يعني مرقنا بفترة لا رايح ولا جاي بالبلد. الحمد لله احنا مقبلين على شهر رمضان، الشهر الفضيل، كل عام وانتم بخير. طبعا بلشت تتحرك القدس، الحمد لله.
بسبب تطعيم الكورونا تحسن الوضع، صار الوضع أحسن الحمد لله، وخاصة في الأيام هذه. بالنسبة للتجار، التجار صار في حركة الحمد لله كويسة للكل.
That said, while Muslims will be allowed to enjoy much more freedom from COVID lockdowns this year, Prime Minister Netanyahu hinting that all Israeli citizens must stay vigilant to prevent any further outbreaks.
אזרחי ישראל המוסלמים, רמדאן כרים. חודש רמדאן עומד בפתח, וזו השנה השנייה בה מציינים את החודש הקדוש תחת צל מגפת הקורונה. אולם בניגוד לשנה שעברה, השנה אנחנו כבר רואים את האור בקצה המנהרה. רובנו מחוסנים ואנחנו מתגברים על המגפה יחד. השנה המסגדים יהיו פתוחים, ניתן יהיה להיפגש עם בני משפחה וחברים. ועדיין יש מעט הגבלות, אבל השמחה חוזרת, החיים חוזרים, כולנו מלאי תקווה.
Then Netanyahu going on to wish a Ramadan Kareem to our Arab and Muslim partners across the world, including now Morocco, Sudan, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates.
אני מאחל לכולכם ברכה גדולה, וכול עם ואינתום בחיר. רמדאן כרים.
The holy month of Ramadan commemorating the Prophet Muhammad's first revelation, beginning tonight and ending May 12th, practicing adult Muslims marking the month with daily prayers, fasts, and reflections as one of the 5 pillars or duties in Islam.
In other news, using his parliamentary immunity, Reform Rabbi Gilad Kariv delivered Torah scrolls for women to read at the Western Wall. And while this action may sound harmless, ultra-Orthodox lawmakers are outraged, likening Rabbi Kariv to people who smuggle cell phones to convicted and imprisoned terrorists. At any rate, here to talk with us today is Vice Chair of the Women of the Wall organization, Tammy Gottlieb. Tammy, thank you so much for being with us. Now, what is your response to ultra-Orthodox lawmakers' remarks that Rabbi Kariv's actions are similar to smuggling cell phones to terrorists, which is a clear reference, of course, to former Arab Knesset member Basil Ghatas, who is himself imprisoned for doing just that?
I think there's no place to even compare between the two situations. Smuggling phones is illegal, is something that is a criminal thing to do, and bringing a Torah scroll into the Kotel is not criminal. Rabbi Kariv even asked about doing it before he did. He asked legal officials in the Knesset, and he was authorized that he is allowed to do so.
So it's not even really smuggling.
Bringing the Torah into the Kotel is not endangering anyone. It's safe. It's just giving us women the right to read from a Torah scroll. You know, there are 200 Torah scrolls in the Kotel, in the Western Wall, for the public use. They're funded from our taxpayers' money. The budget for the Western Wall Heritage Fund is about 100 million shekel a year. That's a budget that actually went up in the Corona time from 80 million shekel a year to 100 million shekel a year to fund Torah scrolls for the public use. But you can only use Torah scrolls in the Kotel of the public Torah scrolls. If you're a man, you can only use them in the men's section. So the reading the Torah is very important for us, are basically not allowed to do something like this in the Kotel because we're not allowed to bring one from outside. So we are very thankful to Rabbi Kariv for doing what he did yesterday and using his immunity. It was one of the first times we've read the Torah scroll for a long time in the Kotel, and it was a very, very emotional and wonderful prayer.
What is the what is the end goal of the movement of the Women of the Wall? Because again, I know that there are ultra-Orthodox and other critics who are saying that this is an affront or even an assault on their practice in some way.
We're not asking to disrespect the tradition of other Jews. We're asking for the state of Israel to respect our tradition and to understand that you can be a legitimate Jew in different colors and different practices. And our practice should also be allowed in the Western Wall and in the state of Israel. It doesn't mean that other practice shouldn't be allowed, but a democracy has to find a way, to give me my ability to be the Jew I want to be, and to give them the ability to be the Jews they want to be. But it has to be, both of us have to have our room and our place in the Jewish state. Otherwise, basically, my Judaism is being called out and being not allowed to be, to be practiced in the Jewish state. Yeah. So the end goal is just to say Jews in the Jewish state may have the right to choose what kind of Jews they want to be. And for the state not to force us to choose the ultra-Orthodox Judaism or the secular Judaism, but to say there's a whole different kinds of Jewish practices that we also want to practice. That's what we want, and that's what we're asking.
All right. Tammy Gottlieb, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Moving on, at sundown tonight, Israelis going from 0 to 100 as we close Memorial Day commemorations with Independence Day celebrations.
בארץ ישראל קם העם היהודי, בה עוצבה דמותו הרוחנית, הדתית והמדינית, בה חי חיי קוממיות ממלכתית, בה יצר נכסי תרבות לאומיים וכלל אנושיים, והוריש לעולם כולו את ספר הספרים הנצחי. לאחר שהוגלה העם מארצו בכוח הזרוע, שמר לה אמונים בכל ארצות פזוריו, ולא חדל מתפילה ומתקווה לשוב לארצו ולחדש בתוכה את חירותו המדינית.
73 years ago today, in the Hebrew calendar, the modern state of Israel declared its independence. And if you go online, you'll see that there are many, many ways to celebrate. From sundown tonight until sundown tomorrow, Israelis enjoying their time with official and unofficial ceremonies, fireworks displays, barbecues, concerts, street parties, and more. And with the coronavirus more or less under control, celebrations are expected to be just that much more raucous. So whether heading into Tel Aviv for all-night raves or hitting the coastlines and national parks for some deserved rest and relaxation, there is no better way to honor the sacrifice of those we remember on Memorial Day, just hours before the parties begin. Now, speaking of gratitude, nearly every nation has a Memorial Day and an Independence Day, but only Israel, as far as I'm aware, intentionally places these days back to back, thereby thrusting a practice of gratitude upon the Israeli society at large. And here to discuss this phenomenon, practicing psychologist Dr. Camila Folkash-Lavan. Camila, it's so great to have you back. Thank you so much.
Really happy to be here again.
All right, so first of all, as a psychologist, what do you make of this very intentional practice of separating these 2 days by a minute, literally?
I think it's actually really, really smart. If I was a psychologist trying to figure this thing out, I'd totally suggest it. Why, you ask? Because if you know, which you do, our country kind of was thrown together very quickly in a really, really turbulent kind of environment, with a lot of people from different places that they came, different languages, all that kind of stuff. So it was very, very important to create instantaneously a country, a culture, a people that are bonded together. So to remind us while we're stressed out and while we're facing war and while we're facing all kinds of difficulties, that there's a lot to be grateful for is key.
So, I mean, especially as an immigrant, how do you see these effects of the juxtaposition on the national psyche? How do you see where do you see the effect of this most?
Mm-hmm. I think it's it's a great question because you can actually see it now as well, not just way back then with our grandparents and whatever, yeah? That people that come here often come for some kind of a hope or idealism, something where they do want to become part of something bigger, come to their homeland, you know, different people with different ideals, why they come here. So I think to be able to understand on an individual level that while you're going through hardship of immigration, of there's a culture clash, there's difficulty with the language, sometimes even going to the bank is very, very stressful, to also at the same time remember that, look, how much you accomplished, all the good things that you do have, to not forget to see them because they help build hope, they help build perseverance, they help keep you moving.
So how do we apply that sort of lesson of being grateful and taking a moment to say thank you, even in the heart of difficulty in our everyday lives? Because of course, it's not every day that you have the country that does it for you.
Right. So it's very important to mindfulness, basically practice mindfulness. What does that mean? Because it's a very nice popular catchphrase, but what does that actually mean? It means literally stop for a moment, because it's so easy to just be caught up in work, in money, in arguments, in all kinds of things, and literally just stop for a moment and look around and say, like, okay, where did I come from? Even this week, what did I accomplish? Even if it's something that seems to you that it's something very small, it's not. Literally, our whole life is built on little, tiny, tiny little steps going forward. That's it.
So is that really the trick, just to, you know, maybe even overlook some of the bigger things sometimes and look for those really small moments?
But that's the thing. Big things are all made out of small moments. That's all that's all we've got. You have to see them.
So you just got to take a minute to, you know, stop and smell the roses, basically.
Exactly.
All right, Camila, I love this. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Moving along, as Israel continues its fast-paced vaccination campaign, the country planning on opening the doors to tourists, scrapping the mask mandate, and fully reopening schools for elementary-aged children, no capsules necessary. On Tuesday, Israel officially announcing plans to allow limited entry for vaccinated tourist groups as soon as next month. And this exciting news will be a massive boost for Israel's economy, as the tourism sector has greatly suffered under the pandemic. Operators of the COVID testing labs in the airport hailing the achievement.
All this very down-to-earth means of diagnosing corona in real time in the airport is an excellent mean to be in control of the corona and enable at the long end opening of the skies for incoming tourism and outgoing travelers.
All foreign visitors will need to get in is a negative COVID test before boarding the flight to Israel and a serological test to prove their vaccination upon arrival. Meanwhile, in more uplifting news, cabinet ministers voting Monday to fully reopen Israeli schools starting next Sunday and to end the requirement that some grades still learn in smaller class sizes. And lastly, the health ministry saying that starting next week, Israelis will not be required to wear face masks outdoors at all unless during a public gathering. These updates being definite signs that life is finally returning back to normal. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
Sunny blue skies for this holiday weekend in Israel. Temperatures for tonight on Erev Yom HaAtzmaut are in the 50s or between 9 to 12 degrees in Celsius. And then tomorrow, perfect for countrywide picnic barbecues and air shows, with highs expecting to be in the 70s and 80s or the 20s in Celsius.
And now, of course, before we go, let's see what's going viral in Israel. This is 8th grader Rotem from Eilat, who got a lot of attention online recently. She is severely bullied in school, and her story went viral on Facebook in Israel. This week, in support of Rotem, police officers, firemen, and Magen David Adom first responders came to visit her with their trucks to show her some love and tell her that she does not stand alone. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.29 shekels to the American dollar and 2.62 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget, of course, to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv and to subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates while you're there. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.